Hello, well, welcome to my channel. I've been toying with the idea of making a YouTube channel to feature some of the vintage baseball cards that I collect, and that on occasion I'll deal some of my duplicates. My name is Rhett, and I actually have a website of mine that I feature mainly just my collection on, but it's called starsofthediamond.com. And as you can kind of see, this is my business card, and it's just a fun site where I can buy and sell different things, but I also sell on eBay. My username on eBay is KRY Vintage. At some point I may actually change that to Stars of the Diamond, but I've been on there long enough that people kind of know me. But today what I wanted to do was actually feature one of my favorite sets, and honestly probably one of the most beautiful sets ever made, and that is the 1911 Zeenut set. Now, for those that don't know or aren't familiar with this particular set, the Zeenut cards were a West Coast, mainly in and around the San Francisco, Oakland area, almost the equivalent of like a West Coast version of Cracker Jack. And in the packages of Zeenut, amongst other brands of candy and popcorn confections that they had, you would find one of these cards. And they're slightly larger than a standard size card. Here's a Pokemon card here right next to it, so you can kind of see the difference between the size of this card, but they have these nice sepia images that just really pop. And so what you'll find with these cards is that they feature only players in the Pacific Coast League, and the Pacific Coast League had teams such as this one from San Francisco. They had Los Angeles, Oakland, and at this time Sacramento had a team, as well as Vernon, which is a suburb of Los Angeles that allowed for sale of alcohol at the games. So that's why that particular municipality had a team. But again, here, as you can see, here's a nice one, and they're just beautiful cards. This is a guy named Heine Heitmuller, and he played for Los Angeles. And fortunately for him, he's one of the only guys in professional history that won a batting title posthumously, meaning in 1912 he was the top batter, in the Pacific Coast League, but he had actually died during the season of typhoid fever, I believe, and he won the batting title the year after. He had played for a little while in the major leagues with the Philadelphia A's, but really wanted to feature some cards that you just don't really see all that often. So that's what we've got going on here. Now, most of the players in the Pacific Coast League at the time, a large majority of them did actually play in the major leagues at one time or another, either before playing in the Pacific Coast League or after. And you'll find players, a lot of players such as for example, Joe DiMaggio also began his career in the Pacific Coast League and then eventually would go on to stardom in the major leagues. And you'll find a lot of players like that. But I have a lot of them graded. That's not necessarily how I collect them, but it's if I buy them graded, I don't take them out. But for me, it's mostly just a storage issue. So I'm going to kind of bring out my set. Now, this set is interesting in that there are variations, within the set, and very few known complete or near complete sets. I believe as far as kind of different players, I don't know if I'm missing other than an impossible card that there's few known copies of, I think I have all the different players in the set, but I am definitely missing some of the variations. And so most of the time when these do get graded, they get placed in these very large holders, but for whatever reason, this one went into a normal size holder, and it's actually a pretty high grade for the set. And they're just honestly just a beautiful set of cards. And there's one card in this set that was featured on a horizontal action shot, and by those in the know in the vintage world, it's considered one of the most beautiful cards ever made. But as far as kind of star power goes, the card I showed at the beginning, it's only graded an authentic, is by far the most famous of the bunch here. And this is, as many would probably recognize if they're a fan of the movie 8 Men Out or the book of the same name, this is Buck Weaver. So Buck Weaver was one of the infamous 1919 Black Sox. And as you can see, this was before his major league career kind of, took off. But there you can see a young Buck Weaver before getting involved with gamblers and the likes of Joe Jackson, Swede Risberg, Happy Felsch, Lefty Williams, Eddie Seacott, Fred McMullen, and the rest. So that's probably our most famous player in the group. The grades on these tend to, they tend to be pretty rough on the cards as far as grades go. But, as you can kind of see, a lot of glare here today. This is a tough card, the Smith for San Francisco. You guys got some attitude on that one. Now, Driscoll can be found in two versions, with his name either spelled correctly as Driscoll or incorrectly as Discal, actually. We'll probably come across that card at some point. That's a cool one. That's a neat pose. It's just a little different than a lot of the other people. And so, like this guy here, for example, can be found in 3 different versions. And this one they are calling the middle size. One where he's a lot closer up and one where he's even further away. So some of the variation cards, and I have a few of them, I can kind of show you a few of those. But they are really hard to find, and I would love to kind of finish my set off. But the card that I'm missing from this set to have kind of one of each player is a guy named Bowen, and just a tough card to find. Only a few known copies of that have surfaced. Spiderbaum is a member of the Pacific Coast League Hall of Fame. Here we got a Carson, Chadbourne. Chet Chadbourne is famous for having, after his career as a player was over, became a umpire in the Pacific Coast League, and actually got into a fist fight with the player, one of the most famous players of the time period. And so here's the Fitzgerald, and here's a variation card you can kind of see. So I showed you earlier the Heaney Heitmuller, and this is considered to be the large image version. And this is a tough card, but even tougher is the small image version of Heaney Heitmuller. And same player, pretty much the same pose there, but just a different projection overall. And this version is a bit tougher, although both Heitmuller in the 1911 set is a tough card. And this is one of the toughest guys in that set, a guy named Fullerton. Kind of a nobody player, but just a really, really hard card to find. Usually one of the last ones that somebody's going to pick up if they're working on this set. There's a Roy Hitt, and he is a variation card, so I'll kind of set him aside. Kind of a rough Hogan, probably need to upgrade that one at some point. So here's a variation here. You can kind of see the two. Same guy, small and large versions. With Holland, I don't know that I really noticed a difference in how difficult those were. That's Ivan Howard, brother of George Howard, who was in the T206 set. Kearns. Got a Kruger there. There's our Portland. Another Portland guy, Kuhn. We got two Los Angeles guys, Lover and Leverins. Walter Leverins played in the major leagues for a couple different teams. Another one of the tougher guys in the set is Melchor. Carl Mitzi. That's carrying his catcher's mitt there. Got Portland, San Francisco, and Sacramento on these three. And perhaps the second biggest name in this set is a guy that a lot of people will recognize if they're, know the 1920s Washington Senators. Roger Peckinpah, was a longtime player for the Yankees and eventually the Senators. And good player. This one is a really nice card, but unfortunately someone long ago added a little number 50 in pencil up at the top, so that kind of accounts for the grade. The backs are blank on all these cards. Every once in a while you'll find some with a stamp on the back from the Collins McCarthy. Actually, in this case, back then it was just the Collins Candy Company who made the Zeenut issue. And I have one or two of those, and I'll try and find that. Guy's got some attitude on that card. Probably don't want to mess with him. There's some, catcher pose and kind of an interesting pose for Tennant over there. Again, you can kind of notice that, a lot of these cards have a lot better eye appeal than their technical grade would be. This guy named Buzzy Wares, and he was a long-time coach for the Cardinals. Later on in his career, he actually has a card in the 1940, team issue as a much older man with the Cardinals. And two more guys here, Zamlock and Wolverton, Oakland and San Francisco. So the Oakland Oaks and the San Francisco Seals. So that kind of rounds out our graded cards. One or two that I had set aside as I wanted to show you later. But here's some of the non-graded ones. And we'll start with kind of the beginning of the alphabet here. So we've got Abbott, Abels, Agnew, Aiken. Now here's one of those variation cards. So here's an Agnew, Arlett, and this is not Buzz Arlett. This is actually his older brother named Alex. And so we have a card here. This would be kind of the smaller pose version. This is a tough card, but this one that has his name much larger is an extremely hard to find card. And these kind of cards, if they're hard to find, you kind of take them in whatever condition you can find them in. So this one obviously has some damage down here. The number written here, and pitcher written twice on the card, as you can kind of see in two different directions. But you take the cards how you can find them, and if you can upgrade them someday, you do it. Barry, that's Shad Barry. He's actually in the T206 set. Bernard, that's a really tough one in this set for Los Angeles. Barry, Brackenridge, Brashear, Browning, Leonard Burrell, Byram, Carlisle, Carmen. This is an interesting guy. He is, through some research that we were able to do, he is the first major league pitcher or player that was of Mormon descent, or an LDS player. His name was Roy Castleton, and he actually once pitched a perfect game in the Ohio State League for Youngstown, Ohio. And so we'll kind of go through here. Couchman, Coy, Krieger, and need to upgrade that one. Cutshaw, Daly, Danzig, Delmas. There's a nice bunting pose there. It's kind of a cool one. Oh, and you can see that one, the bunting pose. They look almost the same, but you can kind of notice on his feet how far away from the border his feet is on this side versus here. So difference in size. This side over here, this card, being the much tougher to find version of that. So again, if you can find those variation cards, you just take them how you can find them. There's Pop Dylan. He was the manager for Los Angeles, popular guy. Had an older man at this time that had played in the major leagues, previously. But here's the variation on Driscoll. So we've got on this side, his name is actually Driscoll, which is the corrected version. On this side, they kind of forgot that first R, so it's Discal. But you can see same pose, just slight different, cropping variation, size variation of the player. Byram, Fanning, Flater, French. Gleason's a little bit of a tougher one. And right up here in just a second, I'm going to take it off to the screen because it's one of the better looking cards in this set. And maybe it's somewhere else. But there's a guy named Halla. Not a great player by any stretch of the imagination, but his card is just really pretty. So Gregory, Cac Henley is in the Pacific Coast League Hall of Fame. Hetling, Heister, Sacramento. And here's another one of those variations. We've got Roy Hitt ×2. One, obviously, his name's on the one side and much larger print. And then the other side. This is the rarer one. Okay, so much tougher to find that one. Hitt, Hoffman, Hosp, Kane. This is Johnny Kane. Kilroy, Knight, Kostner, Lalong, Lurchin, Lewis. Harl Maggart. And he was actually kicked out of professional baseball for gambling. So around the same time as he was involved in sort of the Pacific Coast League version of the Black Sox scandal. Mahoney. This guy is famous in the Pacific Coast League circles. Walter Judge McCready, and a longtime Portland mainstay in Pacific Coast League baseball, in the Pacific Coast League Hall of Fame, and just a colorful character all the way around. Eventually his family owned a stake in the team. George Metzger. This is a tough one. One of the toughest cards to find, not necessarily because the player was, particularly special, but there's actually a descendant of him that tends to buy up all of his cards. So just a tough card to find. You can kind of just pick that one up if you ever see it. Kid Moeller. That's actually a rare variation of that card. I think I already went through the other one that might be graded. And here's one of my favorite poses in the set. It's just different than the other, so it just kind of looks cool. But I may have the Hala actually at my safe deposit, so I'm not sure if that one is in the stack or not, actually, now that I think about it. File, that's a tough one to find as far as kind of the rare players in this set go. Watt Powell. Now here's an interesting one. This is a variation card, but one of the so there's another guy there, Ryan. One of the things that's interesting about him is that he was made in the same picture, almost the same size and everything, but they made two versions of Ryan with Portland. One which looks pretty much like all the other cards, but they made another card of him where his team name and everything is in a box at the base of the card, as opposed to in the traditional way. So same picture, it looks like they did a little slight different in shade, but this Ryan card is one of only two cards in this set that has the little boxed name. And the next card in the stack right after Ryan is the other one. So you can kind of see this one has a little bit of a different look to him as well. This is Tom Seaton, and I guess ironically Tom Seaton was also kicked out of baseball for nefarious reasons later on in his career. But these are the only two cards that had the kind of name in box. So both of them are tough to find, but they also tend to be pretty popular because of the different layout of the two cards. Sheehan, Shin, Steen, Stewart, Stinson. That's another one of those kind of rare size variations. I think I'm actually missing the easier to find regular version, which is kind of funny. Suter, Thomas, Thornton, Tiedemann, Van Buren, Oscar Vitt, who is in the Pacific Coast League Hall of Fame, also played for a long time for the Detroit Tigers. Was a teammate of Ty Cobb for many years. But and then Elmer Zacher kind of rounds it up. But those are the 1911 Zeenuts. There's just there's a little display, to sign off. But just a beautiful set of cards. And again, these cards were only made on the West Coast. And, just for teams, we got Vernon, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland. And at this time, there was also Oakland and Sacramento. That was, kind of was who made up the league at the time. But just a fun set of cards, really pretty hard to find, but doable. And if you're not too picky about the grades, it's a fun set. There's a few impossible cards that good luck with those, but for the most part, if you want them, they're out there, and you just have to have some patience though. Whenever you're dealing with pre-World War II baseball cards, for the most part, populations on these cards are low, especially compared to, kind of the more traditional, cards that we're used to from the 50s on up. So, if you were to go onto the, PSA or SGC population website, possible single digits, low double digits on these. And to be honest with you, of all the Zeenut sets, because they made these cards from 1911, this is sort of the inaugural year, all the way up to 1938. So until Topps came around, the Zeenut series was the longest running, consecutive set of cards ever made. And they would make between, I think the smallest set has 48 cards in it, and the largest set has near on 200. So somewhere between 50 and 200 cards a year, and every year they would make a new set, oftentimes changing the design. So here we have 1911, for example, and I can show you a quick example of what they went to the following season. It kind of just look like a big chocolate bar, but these are what are 1912 Zeenut. So you can kind of see they still went with the sepia, but instead of the posed, you know, kind of studio shots that we have here that are somewhat reminiscent of like the N172 Old Judge cards, you know, with the 1912 Zeenuts, they kind of went with more of the action shots. And let me check real quick, because I had talked a little bit earlier about a back stamp. And I believe I have one or two. Oftentimes you'll find these cards with writing on the back. But I think the cane or one of the other cards in here has the stamp on it. Yeah, there we go. Yep, cane. So as you can see, this card was utilized in some early form of probably a redemption of some kind. So J.J. Collins was Collins from Collins McCarthy Candy Company. And this company would produce many cards. In 1917, they made a set of major leaguers. But for the most part, they were involved in making consecutive sets from 1911 on of Pacific Coast League cards individually. The ones with the back stamp on them tend to be pretty rare and tend to command a pretty good premium. As far as kind of like value on cards like this, it's tough to put a value on them. They're kind of worth what someone's gonna pay you, but you know, for the most part, if you're dealing with a lower grade card, let's see, that has a bit, quite a bit of wear. For example, this card's got a pretty good crease here on or down the middle, across the bottom corner. Has a little bit of scuffing, soiling on the back, but not a terrible card. Good eye appeal. Probably start at about $30 to $50 in this condition, and they go up. Some of the variation cards, it's sort of like name your price, but you need to find people that are willing to pay for it. But a buck weaver can definitely runs into the thousands, even in an authentic grade. Here, this one is slightly trimmed, it looks like, on the right border. And the card that's not particularly tough, at some point I'll probably think about upgrading that particular card, but for the time being it serves my purposes. But again, so these are what the 1912s kind of look like. And, we can kind of go into those a little bit more on another day, if you would like. Some of these have both advertising and non-advertising backs, and so I'll kind of keep the same guy with both with or without. But then in 1912, so that was with the Zeenuts, which was a product that they made similar to like a Cracker Jack. But they also, in 1912, the Collins McCarthy Candy Company made a set of cards that I think is one of the most beautiful sets of cards ever made, and that's the 1912 Home Run Kisses. And as you can kind of see, here's a Home Run Kiss card, and they just have a beautiful border, and this is a pretty nice example of that. Crease free, damage free on the back. Card probably should be in a holder, graded holder, but again, just not something that I necessarily mess with too much. But someday might get there. But hard to show these card saver ones without getting some glare. But so here's what those cards kind of look like. And these Home Run Kisses, for sure, price-wise, are significantly higher than your average Zeenut card. But after the 1912 season, they would go on to make more sets. And they started at that point to make cards that had a small, would be smaller in size when they were trimmed, but those cards will have a coupon at the base of the card that's 99.9% of the time missing, so you end up with a smaller card that has survived. but you can find them still with the coupon. And if that's the case, from 1913 all the way up to 1937, they had coupons. Then the price goes up exponentially. In 1938, they actually got rid of the coupon altogether, but those cards are almost non-existent and among the rarest of all the Zeenut sets. But anyway, so that's just my collection of 1911 Zeenuts, and I do not have the Hala card at the house. That must be at the safe deposit. And so anyways, if you have any questions or something, feel free to leave comments. And again, this is my website, starsofthediamond.com. You can check out, I actually feature most of these cards as a searchable reference for other collectors to look at, but it's also for me too, because if I'm going to shows or if I am at a meet and I find a card that I need and I want to know if this is an upgrade or not, I can pull out my website and look at my own card that I have, and I'm constantly upgrading and updating the cards that I have. And this is probably been collecting these for 15, 20 years now, and it's a fun set of cards to collect, and I'm constantly upgrading. If I can find the same card in a nicer, I will. I don't particularly love having duplicates, so if I end up with duplicates, I tend to put them on my eBay store. And you can find my eBay store, and again, it's you can search under username or seller name, and it's KRY Vintage, and no spaces, anything like that. And we probably have on our eBay store more Zeenut cards than anybody else in the world. So just a set that's fun to collect, and feel free to check them out. If you guys have any comments, or if you would like to see another set of cards featured, I collect baseball, football, hockey, some basketball. I also have a very, very extensive collection of non-sports cards, both 19th century and 20th century, so N cards and T cards. And I have no problem sharing videos of other sets that I have, and they are just fun to collect, and I'm constantly upgrading what I have. And if you have some cards that you think I would be interested in, or you just want to share them, by all means, leave some messages down below, and I'd love to even do a follow-up video or something like that if there's more specifics about this particular set that you'd like to see. I'd love to show it more in detail. This is kind of my first foray into featuring a particular set, but I am very, very open to doing another set of cards or memorabilia or something else that might be of interest to you. So leave comments below. Again, my name's Rhett, and I really enjoy doing this, and I love talking cards. Okay, and bye.